Hello and welcome to Chloe Hat. I am of course Chloe. This is a place of positivity, a place where we talk about how to make the mediocre more magical and go on a search for peace and purpose. So today we are going to be talking about some books. So I have a huge pile of books in front of me. All that I showed then was not all of the books, but I'm just going to tell you about what I have been reading lately. I'll talk about this more at the end of the video when we do my vision board, because I have an update for it today. But reading is something which is always a constant for me. So no matter how bad things get or how wonderful things are, I always have books to go to. It's a constant source of joy. So books are something I want to talk about a lot, because if I can find joy in a book, I'm sure somebody else can too, and I want to share that with you. If I sound a bit off today, I've got a bit of a sore throat. I'm not really sure why, but I'm just trying to carry on with my day as normal and hope that it goes away. So as normal means filming this video. I already started filming this video once, and you know when you just have a day and you can't talk? It was one of those days. And I tried to talk about a book like 4 or 5 times, and each time I couldn't figure out what I needed to say about it. So in the end I gave up. So I'm back at it today, and hopefully I will be able to talk more coherently. Lately I've really been enjoying reading. I do go through phases with reading. I always read. I definitely go through phases where I read more, and lately I've been reading a lot more. I think I've just had a good selection of books recently. That's what I guess I'll put it down to. So I've got the little pile in front of me. It includes books I am reading right now and books which I have read, and I also have my Kindle, and I'm going to discuss Kindle pros and cons as well, because I just thought that would be quite interesting. I am just going to grab from the pile and tell you what I thought of them, I guess. First I have this, One Day by David Nichols. I'm sure most of you have heard of this book or the film. It's quite famous, is definitely David Nichols' most famous book. He is a really wonderful writer, and this was the first book of his I read, and I really enjoyed it. So this book is a romance story. I'm sure a lot of you will have seen the film. The film was quite famous with Anne Hathaway. Is it Anne Hathaway in the film? I think it's Anne Hathaway. Now I'm saying that, I'm doubting myself. I think it's Anne Hathaway in the film. I finally read the book. I had seen the film beforehand, but a long time beforehand, so I didn't really remember it that clearly. So this book takes place over the span of 20 years. It is written on the same day of every year. There's a couple, Emma and Dexter, and it follows them throughout the book on the same day every year for 20 years. What date is it? Let me tell you. 15th of July it is. So this book is just the 15th of July every day for 20 years. And it tells a story of how the two meet, how they become friends, how their relationship develops as friends, and all the things that they go through, both platonically and romantically, as their relationship has lots of different phases. And it's great. It's hyped for a reason. It's very interesting how you can fill in the blanks. You only read one day of each year, yet you know everything that's happened in between. Is very clever. It's very heartbreaking. It's really sad. It's really good. It's just really well written, and so many topics are covered, because I guess because it's over such a long span of time. And it's nice that you see how the characters develop in different phases of their life, and how life is changing, and how although you're one thing one year, you won't necessarily be the same the next year. I don't really want to go into too much detail on it, because I'm sure most people have seen the film or read it, but if they haven't, I don't want to give away spoilers, and there are quite a lot of big things that happen. But both of the characters are very likeable in parts. They're very real in the fact that sometimes they're very likeable and they're very relatable, and then other times they're not. You can see their attraction. It feels very real, and they feel very real. They feel like real people, and they're interesting and also normal at the same time. Not sure if that made sense, but I hope so. This book is clever and it makes you feel things, and that's all you really want from a book, isn't it? Next I have this. It's not really picking up on the camera. It looks like just a big yellow plain page. But this is Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist. There is also a film of this book, and I watched the film before the book because I didn't know the book existed. And I watched the film, and it's very young adult, and it's very much easy to watch teenage type film. I put the book in my book club. If you didn't know, I do a little book club, mainly over on my Instagram and my blog. So I will link that down below, and it's got a reading list for the year. You can just pick up the books you want to read and then we will discuss them. I chose this for my book club because it's written by Rachel Kahn, I'm not sure how to say that, and David Lethian. And I've read David Lethian's books before. Every Day is beautiful and great, and when I saw it was by him, and I enjoyed the film, and so I thought I'll read the book. I like his writing. I didn't exactly have high expectations, if I'm honest. I've written a full review of it on my blog, so you can head there. But I didn't have high expectations because one of the main themes of it is music, and I don't feel like anyone else in the world gets this, but I'm not really a music person. As a theme running through the book, I thought I might find the music aspect of it a bit annoying, and although the film was great, it was very teenage, and I know the book's young adult, and I didn't know if it would feel a bit childish to read it as a 27-year-old woman. However, I like young adult books, so I liked it. I was really impressed by this. It was much better than I expected. I really liked the style of writing. I loved how it was written. So it was written through the perspective of both Nick and Nora. It's a lot about both of them moving on from heartbreak. They meet each other at a concert. He sees his ex-girlfriend, so he asks the girl to kiss him so that his ex-girlfriend sees. It's all a bit weird, but okay. Or no, I think he asked her to be his girlfriend for 5 minutes, something like that. And they end up spending the night together. So the whole book takes place over one evening in New York City. It's just great. I really like both characters. So it switches between the perspectives. I definitely preferred the style of Nick's perspective. It was much more calm. Nora's perspective seemed a lot more chaotic and all over the place. It was clearly to reflect what was going on in her head, so it definitely really showed who she is, but it was slightly more difficult to follow. It was just really great. The two have great chemistry. A lot happens in a short span of time, which I quite like. I quite like it when a book revolves around like one hectic day. I think that's just really interesting because it really brings in the idea that one day can change everything, which I think it can. And the theme of music running through it, which I thought I wouldn't like, I actually did, because it wasn't done in a like obnoxious, snobby, you need to know about music way. And I could be mistaken, but I think all the bands and stuff were made up, so it wasn't like I felt like I was missing out because I didn't know their songs or whatever. I really enjoyed that, and it's quite short, so it's easy to read. I liked it a lot. In fact, I would like a second part to that. It would be really interesting to see how their life progressed from then, but I feel like it's quite an old book, so I don't think that will be happening. And next I'm going to talk about this. This is Open Summer Road by Emery Lord. I really like this author and I talk about her books a lot. I've realised I've been pronouncing her name wrong the entire time. I've been reading it completely wrong. I've been pronouncing it Ermy. It's Emery. The M's after the E. I don't know why in my head I jumbled up the letters, but I assume it's Emery Lord. So Open Summer Road is the story of a girl named Regan who goes on tour with her friend who happens to be a famous musician. So her friend name's Delilah, she calls her Dee, but her fans call her Lila. So you kind of get the musical pop star side of her and then the ordinary side of her with the two different names. It's a bit of a Hannah Montana type thing, I guess, although she never pretends to be someone else, but you know, there's an ordinary side to her life and a famous person side to her life. Anyway, Regan's been through some stuff. She's had kind of a rubbish ex-boyfriend, a bit of a rubbish time, and she's gone on tour with her best friend during the summer to kind of forget about it all. And then Matt Finch, another artist, joins their tour. There is a bit of a love story there. I really like all the characters in this book. It's really good to see how Regan starts as one thing and evolves. She kind of opens up through the book. It's very easy to read, very easy to follow. There are lots of different themes in it. It deals with the fame thing, it deals with being ordinary, it deals with moving on from exes and traumatic pasts. It's really good, really light-hearted with some serious aspects to it. I really like it. I really enjoyed it. All the characters were likeable. At first I wasn't that keen on Regan or Delilah, D. Wasn't really keen on either of them, and then they both grew on me. When Matt came into it, I liked him from the start. I thought he was really great. That's a really good one. I'd say that one, I read that one on holiday and it really made a good holiday read. It really felt like a holiday book. Next I have this one. This is Our Stop by Laura Jane Williams. I only read this a few days ago and I liked it. So this is a love story which is based around Daniel and Nadia. So Daniel sees Nadia on the tube. He's been seeing her on the tube a lot, so he puts that advert on the Missed Connections newspaper page. I'm not sure if that's a real thing or something which was invented for the story, because he wants to find her, he wants to take her out, he wants to go on a date with her. So for a long time the couple don't meet, but there's a lot of near misses. So it kind of plays with the idea of almost missing each other. He knows who she is, she does not know who he is. So he's been seeing her on the tube, he's put in the advert, she decides to respond, there's some conversation going with that, and then it's kind of dropped for a while and they keep almost meeting and missing each other, and they both keep missing the tube and things keep happening, life keeps getting in the way of their meeting. Really nice. Again, I'd say it's a very holiday read, so it's written from both of their perspectives, so you hear from him and from her. A lot of it is kind of about believing in love, believing in romance. It's funny and relatable and very modern day. All of the characters felt very real. They felt like people I'd know, and I like that it made romance feel possible in modern day life. Next I'm going to move on to this one. This is the other book I've read on holiday. This is Essays in Love by Alan D. Button. I have never read anything like it in my life before. It was really, well, it is really wonderful. So this is really bizarre. So I put in my book club thinking it was non-fiction. So in my book club I have a fiction book each month and a non-fiction book each month. I put it in thinking it was non-fiction. It's not, it's fiction. It's fiction in essay form. It's a love story told in essays. What I mean by that is it's a novel. It's definitely a novel. It tells the story of the main character who meets a woman called Chloe on a plane, and they soon fall in love, but the story is written in philosophical essays. So there are essays written about the love and those feelings. It's really, really interesting. There's an essay on the fear of happiness. Actually, I've opened a random page, but I've opened some bits I've underlined, so I guess I like those bits, so I'll read them to you. Proust tells the story of Mohammed II, who, sensing that he was falling in love with one of his wives in harem, at once killed her because he did not wish to live in the spiritual bondage to another. Short of this, I had long ago given up hopes of achieving self-sufficiency. I had gone out of the room and begun to love another, thereby taking on the risk inseparable from basing life around another human being. Lovers may kill their own love story because they are only unable to tolerate uncertainty. The sheer risk of their experiment has happiness delivered. Really interesting. So the chapters include, there's romantic fatalism, false notes, beauty, speaking love, intimacy, fear of happiness, contractions, romantic terrorism, good beyond evil. So I've never read anything like it before, but it's great. It's really beautiful and it really made me think a lot. It's definitely one of those books you have to concentrate on quite a lot. I had to be in the right mood to read it, but when I did, it was incredible. I really would recommend. It's just really interesting. It's a really interesting way to write a story. The story also spans through the entire relationship, which I think is really interesting. So you see the relationship in all phases as well, which is really interesting, and then you see how opinions of that person change and how thoughts change and everything like that. It's one of those books you read and it just kind of makes you feel a bit smarter. It's definitely worth reading if you want some intelligent love story in your life. I've got this, How to Fail by Elizabeth Day. I mentioned this in my last book video, which I will link down below. I said at the time I was going to read it. Now I have read it, and that is a really good book. It's a memoir by Elizabeth Day, who is a journalist. It's about everything she has learned from failure. She also has the How to Fail podcast, which is great. It's really good. It's really well written. It really made me think. There's one particular quote which really stood out for me, so I'm going to see if I can find it. Turn to the right page straight away. But at its worst, people pleasing is actually a deeply selfish attribute. It means you aren't honest about who you are. At its worst, it means that you've never worked that out. You've just lived your life around the contours of other people, squeezing yourself into the remaining space. It's a terrible foundation for a marriage, and inevitably things fell apart. I folded myself into even smaller squares, diminishing myself to such an extent I would have no needs to place on the person I was meant to be sharing everything with. I lost my capacity to express how I was feeling. My thoughts became mutable things, slippery as fish. I was frightened of what would happen if I pulled on the single loose thread of my own uncertainty in case everything else unravelled too. This is great. If you need some reassurance in your life, if you feel like you keep constantly failing, read this book. It just gives you that reassurance that you fell for a reason and there are things to be learned from failure. So it's very relatable throughout. The chapters are how to fail at fitting in, how to fail at tests, how to fail at your 20s, dating, sports, relationships, at being Gwyneth Paltrow, work, friendship, babies, families, anger and success. So for everyone, there's really something you can relate to in there. There's a lot in there about fertility, which I found really interesting. A lot of that stuff I didn't know. There's lots in there to relate to. I would 100% recommend. Next I have my Kindle. So I got given this Kindle by my auntie. She's had it for years and it froze one day, so she thought it was broken. She thought, oh, I've had it a really long time, so it's obviously just gone. And brought a new one, and then it started working again, so she gave it to me very kindly. I'll talk about the books which I read on my Kindle, and then at the end of the video we will talk about my thoughts on having a Kindle. Bear in mind this is a very old Kindle, it's quite heavy and not the most modern. So the books I've read on my Kindle, I watched a film on Netflix called After and I really liked it. The storyline was a bit weak, but I liked the characters, so I wanted to know more about them, and I realised it was a book, so I got the book. And I ended up reading the entire series, which in total was 5 books. It's a difficult one because I sped through them and I really enjoyed reading it. And it's one of those books, since I read it, I've thought about the characters a lot. However, there are definitely flaws to it. So the story of After is a girl called Tessa who goes to college and I guess kind of ends up hanging out with the wrong crowd. Not intentionally, she's very innocent, very sheltered, and her roommate Steph is not. And then she meets a guy called Hardin who is dark hair, covered in tattoos, and kind of gives off that bad boy vibe, but so do the rest of her new friends. And it's the story of Tess and Hardin and their toxic relationship. So essentially they fall in love, but it's definitely a love-hate thing at the start. They're both denying it. There's a lot of arguments and a lot of sexual tension. Eventually they fall in love, and I'm not going to say too much more than that, but it tells the story of them as the books go on, besides the final book, which is actually the first book in Hardin's perspective. So the first book, After, is written purely in Tessa's perspective. I find her character to be a bit frustrating and annoying. She's very innocent and very sheltered, and I get that, but yeah, I find her a bit irritating in the first book, but then she does slowly develop through the book. And then from the second book onwards, the books are written through the perspectives of both Hardin and Tessa, and I definitely preferred reading Hardin's perspective. There's a lot in the books about alcohol abuse, and there's a lot of betrayals in the book as well. There are also a lot of twists and turns. Now, this book kind of gives me Twilight vibes, and I know that's a weird thing to say because I'm not particularly a fan of Twilight. However, I will say I don't think it's incredibly well written. It seems like it's definitely written with a very young audience in mind, and it definitely romanticizes a very toxic relationship. What I found out after reading the first book is it was initially written as Harry Styles fan fiction, which I find utterly bizarre because I do not get Harry Styles vibes from Harden at all, apart from the fact he's got dark hair and tattoos. He is nothing like Harry Styles, but it was purely an accident, and we all know I love Harry Styles. Harry Styles' biggest fan, but that would have put me off reading it if I knew that. I wouldn't have read a book knowing it was Harry Styles fan fiction because I would have expected it to be very childish. And in places it does feel childish. You kind of want to shake both of the characters because some of their arguments are ridiculous and it's not necessary, and especially in the first two books it gets very repetitive. They're happy and then they're not, they're happy and then they're not, and they're together and then they're not, they're together and then they're not. It's very repetitive. But during the later books, when it begins to revolve more around other characters, more around their parents, which I think is definitely more interesting. There was also a lot of sex in the book, which is fine. Like, we can have a sex scene, a lot of sex scenes. It's very much a core theme is their like sex life and their chemistry, and I guess that kind of relates to their passion for one another. And I get that it's a big part of the book, but also again that feels very repetitive because it's always written quite similarly. So the book definitely romanticizes a toxic relationship, and a lot of books do. And I personally, I think that's okay, because I do think to an extent writers need to trust the readers to understand that a book of fiction is fiction and it's not saying this is right, it's just telling the story of two people, and the writers need to trust that the readers will understand that. However, if this was written as Harry Styles fan fiction, the audience are going to be much younger than me, which makes me feel weird about all the sex scenes, and it also makes me feel weird about the toxic relationship, because as a younger person I might not have understood that so much. I might have met a toxic person and thought, oh, he's like Harden, and I know I wouldn't want to be with someone like that because I know that's not good ground for building a relationship on. But I do think to an extent the writer can't always be thinking about who's reading it. The writer needs to write and to trust that their audience aren't stupid, and it would only make sense to write flawed characters and flawed relationships for it to be realistic. I really like the growth of Harden's character throughout the books, and I like Tessa. I think they complement each other. They both tone each other down slightly. Tessa's a bit of a sheltered neat freak, and Harden's a bit of a bad boy, and together they both balance it out quite nicely. But I really enjoyed the book, and I actually haven't stopped thinking about the characters since, and that says a lot. And I've read a couple of books since, but I have kept thinking about that world, so I was very immersed in it, clearly. A lot of the book, it quotes a lot of classic literature, a lot of references to Pride and Prejudice and Gatsby, and what's the other one it references a lot? And it quotes Wuthering Heights a lot. Both the characters like books, and that's a part of it which I really enjoyed. I liked that Harden's character liked books because it kind of took down that bad boy image slightly, a bit like just Mariana. It quotes this a lot throughout. Whatever souls are made of, his and mine are the same, which is from Wuthering Heights. And a lot of the beautiful quotes in it are quotes from other things. But I enjoyed it. I have not stopped thinking about that world since. There were some twists and turns. Something, I think it was in the third book, but I could be wrong. Something quite serious happened, and it was really bizarre because the characters didn't seem to react to it too much. It just kind of happened, and it didn't seem like there were that many consequences to it, which seemed a bit strange to me, and I wanted there to be more from that. One of the twists, one of the like character betrayals I would never have seen coming, so it was really cleverly done, and each book kind of hooks you in with a twist, and so you want to keep reading. I liked how it ended, actually. Some things I didn't like that Tessa had a career change right at the end. Sorry if that's a giveaway, but it's not a big deal in the story, but I just didn't think it was necessary. So I really wanted to talk about those. I have been itching to talk about those since I read them, and I might reread them as well because I did rush through them and I feel like I want to get my thoughts straight on them. Now we are on to what I am currently reading. So firstly I have this, Feminist Don't Wear Pink and Other Lies by Scarlett Curtis. Now I've had this since it came out, and I've kind of read the odd few essays, but I've never gone through it from the start, so that's what I've been doing. So I'm just over halfway through now. This is good. If you're into feminism, it's easy to read, very digestible. The essays are all written by different women, so you can choose who you'd like to read an essay written by, and they're all good. It's inspiring, makes me proud to be a woman, and teach me a lot about feminism, and I'm really enjoying it. And then the other book I'm reading right now is Someday by David Levium. So I read Every Day and Another Day a couple of years ago, probably like 3 years ago or so. Now I've got Someday. I'm about halfway through Someday. I didn't realise that was a third book, so when I came across it in Waterstones, I was really chuffed. I loved Every Day. I got a feeling I reviewed it on my blog. I think it must have been about 2 years ago I read it. Maybe more, maybe 3. There is also a film of that on Netflix as well. Every Day is the story of somebody who switches bodies every day. So he wakes up and he's in somebody else's body. I'm saying here, there's not really gendered. The character A wakes up in somebody else's body. So the story of Every Day is the story of how he wakes up in somebody else's body. Nobody knows his secret. He just pretends to be that person for a day until the next day when he's in a new body. Then he meets a girl and then he ends up telling her his secret and she believes him. Eventually, it takes a while, but she believes him and they fall in love. And each day when A is a new person, she meets him as a new person every day. Kind of their story. And then the next book, Another Day, is written, the same book but written in her perspective. So you see both perspectives. And now I am reading Someday. So I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give away how Every Day ends, but Someday is carrying on from that. You get A's perspective, you get Rhiannon, the girl's perspective, and there are also other characters whose perspective you hear throughout this one as well. You also find out that A is not the only person who switches amongst bodies. There is somebody called X who you read his perspective apart from. There's a clear difference between A and X because A clearly does his best for the person he is for the day. He does good and he just tries to get on with their day and make it as normal as possible, and he clearly has a heart, whereas X takes advantage of the people whose bodies he's in for the day. About halfway through that now. I started reading it yesterday, so I've read quite a bit in a day and it's really good. I love the style of writing. Again, I just love David Levium's writing style. It's very easy to read, very beautiful at the same time. Right, that clearly went on forever. That is all the books I want to talk about. I just want to talk about my Kindle and what I'm enjoying about it. So, like I said, I got given a Kindle from my auntie. It's definitely not the most recent one. I am finding that I'm enjoying it more than I expected. So I read the entire series of After on the Kindle, and what I found was it's easier to carry with me, so I was more likely to read on the bus, and it's less heavy, it's easier to get out. So I actually found I read more with it. I also like that it's got a light, got a little flicky out light, so I didn't need to worry about having a lamp and things. I definitely have read more on it, but I do like the feeling of having a book, of buying a book, being in a bookstore, being surrounded by books. It's easy to carry with me, easy to hold, it's light, and I like that you can change the size of the font and you can also check the meanings of words and things like that. So I definitely enjoyed it more than I expected. However, I will still be buying physical copies of books if they're books which I feel are going to mean a lot to me. With books, if I just want a book immediately, that's a good thing about Kindle, you can just get a book right then. If I want a book immediately, I'll get on there, but I like having books. Yeah, so that's just some thoughts on my Kindle. Right, this video has gone on for ages. I am going to end it now. Thank you very much for watching. Please let me know what you're reading down below, and subscribe and like the video and all of that good stuff. I almost forgot I've got something to go on my vision board. So this is a quote, and I initially ripped it out of a magazine because I wanted to quote it in a blog post or something, and then I just kept hold of it and I was like, I'm obviously keeping hold of this for a reason. So I think it's going to go on my vision board. So it's about books I thought was relevant for this video. It says, books have healing power. The right character in the right novel read at the right time can soothe heartbreak, ease anxiety, and make you feel a little less alone in the world. So I quite like that quote, and it's a reminder that I've always got the option of reading a book no matter how I feel. So I'm going to pop that in my little gap on my board, just here. Perfect. Right, sending you good vibes. Bye.